Hello, Jeando.
Hello, Kevin.
In the last couple of episodes, we've been talking about mechanical advantage. So, can you tell people what is a position of mechanical advantage and what are the means for a person to obtain a position of mechanical advantage?
Yes, yes. Thank you for making the mention of the means to obtain the position of mechanical advantage, because very often we are focused on the end. We are focused, and when we look at, for example, the pictures as I like to watch my pupils, I want my pupils to perform actions, a series of actions, all coordinated together, because there is this idea that what we see is the result. And Alexander, I'm very keen on this sentence where he say the means of obtaining the position of mechanical advantage. The position of mechanical advantage, well, is not really interesting. What is interesting is how to obtain it. Yes, because you may see Alexander moving somebody and you will recognize something strange. I mean, you recognize something you're not used to doing, or if you, especially if you watch yourself on video. I remember showing a picture to a modern Alexander teacher and showing a procedure invented by Emily Diana Watts. And I remember the teacher saying to me, "Well, yes, and what? I can do that any day." Yes, she could do that any day. She was not filmed because when she was filmed, it was absolutely impossible for her to coordinate the different actions that would have made her look as Mrs. Watts. And so she felt she was doing it. In fact, when she was filmed, unfortunately, she was not at all. So there was a very marked difference between what she thought she was capable of doing, what she thought well, for example, you use instructions. You want the back to lengthen. It's an instruction that is often used. Let the back lengthen and widen. It's very interesting. Well, it is because Alexander himself promoted that instruction. Yet, it is very interesting to watch what happens when a modern Alexander teacher is performing very, very simple actions like lifting the hands to touch someone. And if the action is filmed, then again we are confronted with the problem. Is that how do you translate instructions into actions? And so the encoding of actions become important. So today I'm going to ask, there are orders, of course, that we've been using in the modern Alexander technique. Let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the back lengthen and widen. But what are these? What are those words? And more importantly, how do you translate these words into action? So, to come back to our, well, the chronology of the story I'm telling, you must remember that last episode I was discussing this idea that modern Alexander teachers are promoting, is that at the end of his life, his end of his teaching life, Alexander had well, let go of the idea of position of mechanical advantage. And the whole of our last interview was to, in fact, combat that idea and show that in practice, Alexander was seen to, in fact, perform a procedure that was explained in 1910, well, at the beginning of his teaching life, of course, as the means of obtaining the position of mechanical advantage. Just to remind you, or in case you haven't seen the previous interview, these are pictures taken from the two films, 1950, 1951, 4 years before Alexander's death. Yes? And well, during the films, And these are two different films that he made. They are the only one recorded. And he's doing all the time the same thing. He's placing the pupil in a position of, he calls, of mechanical advantage. That is, he's inclining person's torso backward in sitting. And so, well, for me, this is concrete proof, evidence that Alexander was still performing the same technique in 1950 as in 1910, or even before. So this is interesting. And what is interesting are the comments we have already seen last time about how Alexander explained the position of mechanical advantage. He explained that he's going to help the pupil organize conditions. Conditions such that the pupil is going to be able to lengthen while being out of balance, inclined backwards. And obviously, when you see Alexander performing the action, you will think that he's helping the pupil. The whole idea of support given is giving support. Well, I mentioned that there is no support given beneath the armpit. The middle torso and the lower torso are left to the care of the pupil. And it's obvious that when the person is inclined backward, there is an obvious cantilever, which means that the weight of the torso is set at a distance from the fulcrum. And I explained that this is the principle, the mechanical principle that we are using. And it's in a way using load, that is this moment arm between the passive weight of the torso and the supporting point, and using that in order to stretch elastic tissues, which are then going, of course, first to extend, to resist with a proportional energy to the distance of the weight to the fulcrum. And the further back you go, and the more you're going to apply the load. And the idea is to apply the load on elastic structures, which then are going to, well, in fact, store what we call elastic energy. There is nothing mystical in this. It's absolutely mechanical. You imagine a spring, and when you stretch, when you can apply a correct direction of extension to the spring, well, the spring will resist. And it will resist function of the weight applied, of the force applied on both sides, and functions, of course, of the speed. This energy is stored as long as the conditions of lengthening are there. Well, the elastic will maintain this resistance. And more than that, when you change the conditions, well, by bringing the torso back above the fulcrum, then this energy can be used as a spring, as a catapult. And it's obvious during the film that Alexander is using this natural effect of springs. I just want you to have another look at what is happening just after he's brought the person back. Look at this. The person is really going to stand without any of the throwing of the torso forward. There is no use of an acceleration of the weight as if the person was rotating around the hip and down. The person is not rotating down. In the modern Alexander technique, there is this myth about going up. Yes, the person is going up. And it's not Alexander that is pushing her up, that is creating like an antagonistic pressure, and the pupil will oppose the pressure in a very simplistic idea that has been developed by Frank Pierce Jones, that it's the opposition of forces that will bring the pupil up. Certainly not in these films. in these films, it's obvious that in fact the pupil is employing antagonistic pulls. So we have this idea that of course it's necessary for the pupil to participate in this movement because the hands of Alexander are not providing support for the middle and lower torso. I explained last time that this should lead, if the pupil release anything of the muscles of the torso, the person is going to collapse under the fulcrum, under the cantilever that is formed. And so when Alexander says that there are orders necessary for the elongation of the spine, I would just say, well, yes, there are orders necessary to resist the deformation that should be created by adding the torso go back. There should be, how is it that the person can lean backward very far and look so puzzled that there is nearly no effort performed by the person? And so you have to ask yourself different questions. And there are two questions at the moment that I'm really interested in. What are these orders necessary for the elongation of the spine and the freedom of the neck? Yes? And in the modern Alexander technique, it's very simple. It is said that you should repeat or rehearse the order, let the back lengthen and widen. Let the spine go up. Or let the neck be free. So this would mean that the order necessary for the elongation of the spine are let the back lengthen. It sounds ridiculous. It's like you have a person that has a stammer and you say, just calm down and speak normally. Just lengthen your back. It's about the same level. Yes? Stop doing the wrong thing. Well, the wrong thing is to shorten the spine. We know that. We know that most people, when subjected to cantilever, subjected to lack of direct force sent into the chair, that person would not react in the way we see that gentleman react. We know that the person has a tendency to shorten the spine, the tendency to arch the back and protrude the abdomen. It's seen everywhere, not here. But then the problem of the elongation of the spine comes in when you start looking at Alexander helping the person organize the necessary elongation of the spine. Well, we have an idea of what we mean by elongation of the spine. But sometimes it's better to go back and look at what Alexander is saying about it, because when we are going to compare what he's saying, well, first of all, you will see that, yes, there is a geometrical lengthening of the lumbar spine. But Alexander apparently has nothing to do with it. His hands are very far away from that spot, and I do not believe that with his hands, Alexander, by touching the head and the upper thoracic spine, can do anything to affect the middle spine. There is no magic here. The person is in charge. I mean, the pupil is in charge of what movements are occurring at the middle and lower torso, and it's obvious that he's been given some instructions not to let the lower torso overrun the upper torso in going backward, because otherwise the person would be seen collapsing. If you accelerate the pelvic bone, when you rotate, well, you immediately arch the back, and the middle torso is going to crunch, and you're going to find that the upper torso is not anymore lengthening away from the front of the pelvis. So these are all questions that I had to ask myself. So one is here, brought to the fore by Irene Tasker, a very intelligent woman that worked with Alexander. And here, I mentioned last time that there was a very interesting quote. Here it is. It's a quote where she's reporting what happens during lessons that her brother had with Alexander in 1938. And she made notes about these lessons, and these notes made a very profound effect on her, but on me too. Because Alexander explained that coming forward, when you're sitting, coming forward, leaning forward, or getting ready to stand, always make people cramp the chest and shorten. This is exactly what I've explained. I've explained it in going backward. People have a tendency to cramp, but they have the same tendency to cramp when they are leaning forward. And so Alexander gives very quite neat instructions. And he says, never let the body overrun the head coming forward. Never let the head overrun the body in going backward. It was quite a shock for me to read these instructions that are, well, first of all, they are clear. Well, it's difficult to not to see the meaning he's giving. Never let the head overrun the body. So the body in sitting is not the body as a whole, it's of course the torso. And what we see Alexander's left hand doing is exactly maintaining the head forward of the torso, which means, and this is fundamental, this means that Alexander is monitoring the movement of the head relatively to the movement of the lower torso. Never let the head overrun the body in moving backward, means that he's checking that the speed of the head going back is always slower than the speed of the middle torso going backward. And this is fundamental because this is reasonable. It is possible to use the same instructions and there, well, to perform exactly the same procedure without any hands on yourself whatsoever. If you start filming yourself just moving backward on your chair, you sit on the chair and you just move backward, and you can even explore what's going to be the effect on your vocal mechanism. Is it possible to lean back and speak and come forward again? And then you will discover that yes, you need instructions to regulate the speed of the different parts of the torso in moving backward. As soon as you've discovered this, well, you've discovered also that you can apply exactly the same technique in leaning forward. And most people would think, well, this is quite intricate. I have already my somatic technique, everything is fine. Well, that's the point. Everything is not fine. When you look at Alexander, well, creating the conditions, well, there is something that you must note is that I have taken a picture on the net of a modern Alexander teacher. I've been very well, I've cut the photograph. I can't see the head, but you can see what's happening. The person is simply well, reaching forward with the hands. When the person is reaching forward with the hands, the person is a modern Alexander teacher, and it's absolutely obvious that well, the back is arching. The back is arching, and there are movements that are associated with this shape. I am not interested in the shape itself. I'm interested in the movements in order to obtain a shape like this. Exactly like I explained with the Alexander students, it is necessary to observe and have regard for the movements and the speeds of the different movements. You take the mechanism of the torso parts and you think, how can I reproduce the same gesture as the one seen on the right? It is necessary to apply a very strong movement forward to the middle torso, to the ribs, yes, and also oppose this movement to two other movements. We are looking at something quite simple, in fact. We are looking at a system where, well, we have two extremities and a center. So when you have two extremities and a center, you have a geometrical shape we call a curve, and it's possible to, as Alexander explained, shorten the curve. To shorten the curve, well, it's very simple. You need to move the center of the curve faster forward than the two others, the two extremities. And so this is all fine. We have a corresponding definition given by Alexander. So it should be, it's not here apparently, it's not there either. So now that's the explanation of what we mean by shortening the back. It's necessary to follow Alexander when he says what it is that he means by lengthening the back. And he says that there are stumbling blocks in the way of correct performance, and he says that those arise mainly from the tendency of the great majority to curve and shorten the spine unduly. This is curving and shortening the spine unduly. It doesn't matter that it's a modern Alexander technique teacher. The person is offering the image on the net for us to look at, and we see that yes, there is a tendency for the spine to shorten, and for the abdomen to protrude, and for the upper torso to be in fact unduly lifted. It's not only the upper torso that is unduly lifted. You will see that the fact that the person is raising the hands triggers a habit of raising the shoulders. And when you raise the shoulders as much as this, what happens is that the muscle that we call the muscle of the neck have to enter into action. Are they necessary to lift the hands at that height? Certainly not. It's absolutely possible to direct the elbows in opposite direction to make absolutely certain that the shoulders are not directed in this way. But they are. The movements of the shoulders are directed in this way. So the person has a habit of raising the hands. It's a pity because in this somatic technique, they do use the hands all the time. So apparently the person has a habit. She doesn't even see, because she posts this image on the net to show how she's working. Well, what we see is that she's working with a very strong habit to shorten the back and unduly lift the shoulders with the upper torso, of course. Though Alexander says nothing else. Tendency of the great majority to curve and shorten the spine unduly, and otherwise to interfere with the correct conditions of the muscular system of the back, the spine, and the thorax. Now, let's come back to the very important part. The important part is, what do we mean when we say lengthen the stature, when we say lengthen the back? And you will find that it's a geometrical reasoning that Alexander proposes. Here it comes. A simple experiment will serve to prove this shortening by the increase of, say, the lumbar curve. Take a piece of cardboard of 6 inches in length and place it flat on a table or against a wall. With a pencil, draw lines on the table or wall as close to the upper and lower ends of the cardboard as possible. Remove the cardboard, curve it slightly across the lower portion, about an inch above from the end which touch the lowest line. Replace it on the lower line without interfering with the curve, and you will find that it does not reach the upper line any longer. A similar condition occurring in the human being means a shortening in stature. So this is all fine. Everybody will understand this. So the person is shortening the lumbar spine. Fine. Yes, but there is still a problem with Alexander's explanation, is that why is it then that we should not let the head overrun the movement of the body in leaning backward? Because the explanation of the geometric expansion of the torso relative to the lumbar spine works well. Well, yes, but what about the thoracic spine? Alexander has great care to maintain the upper thoracic spine forward. It's what he's seen doing with himself. I've heard some modern Alexander teacher, well, retorting that Alexander was pulling down, that he was not lengthening the spine, that because their conception of lengthening the spine is to lengthen not only the lumbar spine, as explained, but to in fact lengthen the spine as a whole, as if you were lying down on a table, as if you were doing. There is a procedure that was used in the first training course, that is the door procedure. And I recently found some images of the door procedures that was performed before Alexander. And it's quite interesting. It's always the same author. It's a very interesting author called Checkley. And Checkley shows the door procedure, but there is something totally different when you compare Alexander's conception of lengthening the back, which we see, well, very clearly here. Yes, this is what Alexander means by lengthening the back. And lengthening the back in Checkley's and modern Alexander technique supporters, I don't think they support Checkley's anyway. I think it's their conception of lengthening the back. You see an image that is more like this one, where this is the 1888 image, where you see, I think it's a military person that is first asked to have his back against the side of a door or side of a wall, and then is straightening the back. Well, what you see is that, yes, there is a marked lumbar curve, and of course the unduly lifted chest. But what you see the person performing is just trying to flatten the whole back. Flattening the whole back means that you have a straight line idea of what the back should look like. Yes? And when this happens, if you set a ruler on the sternum bone, you will find something. You would find the same exactly when the person is lying down, because you can get the same effect if you just rotate the image and bend the knees. You will find more or less the same as the semi-supine modern practice. And you will find in this case that the sternum direction is such that the middle of the chest is protruding forward still. Nothing has changed. Alexander performance of a model is totally different. It's absolutely obvious that he's not lengthening the spine according to a straight spine concept. He's certainly lengthening the lumbar region, as he explained geometrically, but when it comes to the upper torso, not this idea of not overriding the movement, yes, that we had here is saying never let the head overrun the body in going backward. Well, now when I look at the image, like this one. What I say is that, well, the sentence is very centered around the head, but how is Alexander obtaining the relative position of the head to the torso? Well, I had to change the instructions. I had to start to tell myself, well, never let the upper thoracic spine override the middle thoracic spine in going backward. Because in checking the speed of the movement of the upper thoracic spine going back, I could check the movement of the, of course, cervical spine, the neck. So never let the neck override the back in going backward. And in that way, I had no difficulty. It was as a result obvious that the head was not overriding the speed of the back in going backward. So I started to realize that Alexander's right hand here on the upper thoracic spine is more important than the other one, than the left. That when you have no hands upon yourself and you want to, well, the means of obtaining the position of mechanical advantage are very simple. I just have in mind a certain model that Alexander is proposing, and I just start gently to incline my torso backward. And I check to see if the upper thoracic spine can stay forward of the middle thoracic spine. And in these conditions, we obtain a different result, which is that the sternum bone, which is, it's absolutely easy to locate the top and lower extremity of the bone, and you will find that then in this condition, leaning back, you are not leaning back with the lower part of the sternum protruding forward, as in the Shickley shape. Suddenly you find that the sternum and the lower back, which is the one, the lumbar region, the thoracolumbar region, is really stretched. So then suddenly what some people consider as an effect of old age is certainly not. It's absolutely reasonable. These are mentally guided actions, and here they are not guided only by the gentleman. The responsibility for the speed of the upper thoracic spine in this image is not this gentleman, it's of Alexander. Alexander is seen like imprinting this speed proportion to the pupil. It's not the pupil that has a problem. Alexander, with his left hand, is really trying to get a nice upper thoracic curve. So suddenly, it becomes suddenly difficult to reconcile the modern Alexander technique lying down system with what Alexander was practicing. It's difficult to find an explanation. Why is it that Alexander is seen performing these actions so that the person in leaning back will not override the movement of the middle torso with the movement of the upper torso? I had to find something to explain this, yes? And so the explanation, curiously, is exactly the same as the one I gave last week. Last week we were discussing what could be this idea of mechanical advantage, where we have a bony structure that is seen rotating around a fulcrum, and we can use, in fact, the passive weight of the structure itself, as long as we can direct the lower spine. We know that bones transmit force So if you organize the lower spine so that it's going, as Alexander said, back, so that you have a neat line between lumbar 3, the third lumbar, and the lower part of the sacrum, which is what Alexander is seen performing time and again. When I look at different films, it's always the case. He's always applying his own definition of lengthening the spine for the lumbar, the thoracolumbar junction. So when that happens, well, something is going on, is that the weight of the back is set further back than the axis of rotation. If you remember, I mentioned this teacher of the modern somatic technique, and what we see is that, in fact, she's directing the weight forward. When you look at the configuration of the thoracolumbar spine, you will find that the person is sending the weight of the upper torso, in fact, forward of the fulcrum. This is exactly the opposite of what FM Alexander is seen doing. I suspect that the orders of movement that they give themselves in order to prepare for this action are totally different. I think that Alexander is using concerted orders of movements. Is interested in the speed of certain movement or not overriding the speed of others. And this teacher has not been trained this way. This teacher has been trained to feel something that approaches good use. The orders necessary for the elongation of the spine, for the freedom of the neck, she knows them. She knows let the neck be free. I'm certain she's heard that she should stop the wrong thing and the right thing would be happening. She's been working for years and years for the wrong thing to stop. Well, yes, video and pictures and photographs are telling another story, of course. Well, it's necessary to reason. And so now, when I observe, this strange configuration of the upper thoracic spine, well, I maintain it's voluntary. And the idea is, to explain it, is exactly the same. It is a position of mechanical advantage. We can imagine that the upper torso and the neck and the head and the shoulders and arms create a mass, and this mass is set forward of the supporting fulcrum. I know that the fulcrum comes through the spine. It's around the thoracic 7, and I see that from the thoracic 7 upwards, everything goes forward and up. You would say fall forward and up. There is no flat line there. No, because it's possible to use that weight, yes, which represent no effort, of course. You just let the head go forward and up. You just let the upper cervical spine and upper thoracic spine go forward and up, and this weight is going to stretch the thoracolumbar fascia from above. So now we have two actions. We have one action that I explained last week, where the mass of the torso is used at a distance from a fulcrum, which is the hip, which therefore creates a load that is stretching not only the back, but stretching mainly the front springs that I defined last time as the quadriceps muscle, the rectus femoris, the list is long, the iliotibial tract, the fascia lata, and the psoas group. All are going to be stretched by this strange organization of the back that is completely lost with the somatic technique. Nobody understand this. Most people, when they lean forward, they absolutely shorten the back. And if you do shorten the back, the mechanical advantage that is seen here completely disappears. Well, it disappears because the thoracolumbar string is going not to be stretched. If it's not stretched, it's not a spring anymore. It's a string that is flaccid, that is slack. Slackness is the enemy. Release and slackness are the main enemy if you want to obtain a position of mechanical advantage. In this case, sending the weight of the upper thoracic spine and upper torso forward and upward is a solution of mechanical advantage. You're going to get a spring that is going to work for you. And, well, the concept is there, totally different from the simple idea that can only apply to the, well, lumbar region, thoracolumbar region. It's necessary to understand that we are using a new fulcrum to set, in fact, the back to work. And to work means not using the muscles to resist, not using force. No, to work means to start working as an elastic spring. And so now this is a completely different theory. There was a theory that it's because you're doing too much with your muscles, you should release your muscles and everything will be fine. If you stop the wrong thing, the right thing will happen. Well, here it's not only to stop the wrong thing, it's to start, in fact, organizing the movements together. Because in order to get the thoracolumbar fascia to be stretched both by the lower movements and the upper movements, well, you need to organize the movements. You need to start having definite instructions of movements, and if you do have definite instructions of movement, then we get into some experimental procedures, which are going to show that without any physical preparation of the muscles, without any activation of the muscles, there are some things that start to become possible that felt absolutely, I can tell you, really absolutely impossible. We have here a student, a long-distance student, and what he's playing at is very simple. I encourage everybody to play with it. It's called the frog dance procedure, after a famous text by Alexander, by Frederick Matthias Alexander, where we just establish at first the distance from the wall to the front of the ankle. We want to make sure that when the person is standing with the ankle at a very clear established distance from the wall. And then the person is using a ruler of the exact same length and placing the ruler on the lower part of the sternum. It's the center of the front plane of the torso when leaning forward. Yes? So we start from a static image. The person is not moving at all. There is no acceleration of movements whatsoever that could be used in order to perform the frog dance. What is the frog dance? It's an action word. You must have in mind. The action word is rise. The person is leaning forward. The person cannot move the torso further forward than it is because there is a ruler that is set against the wall. Yes? And as you will notice, of course, the thoracolumbar junction is lengthened, which means that the movement of the lower torso and the movement of the upper torso are coordinated together. But also, the upper torso is set forward. There is a hump that is shown with some color here, and you will see that the hump is maintained while the person is, in fact, responding to the order to rise. The person is set on the chair and slowly, slowly, it takes 2 seconds to go to monkey. The person is asked to go into monkey. Going into monkey means that we want the person to go up right until the moment where the knees are going to, the back of the knees are going to touch the chair. This action, this procedure, the frog dance procedure, is absolutely impossible to do while trying to contract the muscles in order to rise. Either the person has the correct condition of the position of mechanical advantage, storing mechanical energy already when the person is still not moving, or the person cannot rise. It's the only way to, in fact, make the pupil understand that there are unwanted movements, because at first, when the person is asked to rise, well, of course, this student has had a few lessons, and the first time when he was asked to rise, he was trying to rise at the moment of hearing the instruction. He was trying to do something in order to rise. If he tries, he will shorten the back. And on top, he will not succeed. It's impossible to do it muscularly in this way. I've had people telling me, yes, I can, very strong young male doing sports or doing all sorts of things. They say, I can. Fine. I just accept the statement as long as there is a video with the control condition to go for it, to show for it. Yeah. Because I've heard so many people telling me things, but when there is a video, suddenly, apparently, becomes impossible because of the video being there. In physics, the video being there does not affect the possibility of moving or not of rising or not rising. If you know how to create a position of mechanical advantage, that is to generate these elastic pools, you will rise. If you don't, you will not. It's simple. And this is necessary because there are people that ask themselves, why is conscious guidance better than the usual Alexander technique? Why is conscious guidance any more effective? Well, because we can rise, because we can maintain the condition of the back, because leaning forward can be done while lengthening the back and not, as I've shown here, leaning forward with shortening the back. It's very, very practical. Either you're protruding the abdomen or you're not. Either you're shortening the muscle of the neck or you're not. And it is obvious that despite the strong stimulus that represent this procedure and the action, at first I will tell you, you feel it's impossible. The stimulus is horrendous. Yet, when you start understanding that there are, in fact, orders of action that will, in fact, create the conditions that we require, then it will become very reasonable. So it is important to understand that the position of mechanical advantage is not conditioned, as some have thought when I was explaining the lower torso movements relatively to the support of the fulcrum, thinking that it was a local conditions. No, it's obvious that it's necessary to understand the movement of the lower, middle, and upper torso together in order to get the effective effect that we call, lengthening and widening the back. Questions?
Yes, you have used a picture quite a lot of Alexander working with the pupil, where you can clearly show the upper torso going forward from above the armpit. Above the armpit goes forward, it's clear. How do you respond to people who would say that you're just picking one still shot from a lot of different movements and using that? How do you know that this really is something that was done with multiple people multiple times?
Oh, first of all, because I have quite a number of pictures. But there is another reason, is that I have explored how I could reproduce the same organizations of movements. And I've found very simple configurations with rulers, where these configurations lead to the capacity to squat and stand and rise without any muscular effort. So for me, the question of antagonistic pulls is now a fact. It's something we can produce with complete mathematical accuracy. So for me, this is even more important than seeing Alexander doing it with himself or doing it to other people. Well, when I see two films where Alexander is, well, manipulating people in order to get that shape of the back, well, for me, as a translator, when I want to translate what he means by lengthening the back, well, I've got an example. Yeah? When I've got an example, I reproduce the example. I find out how difficult it is to reproduce the example. I try to find the instructions that help me to reproduce the example. I find it very, very complex until I can discover a geometrical organization that is simple, that is simple to represent, portray, and then I start to practice myself and find out that this organization of the movements of the different parts is what I was looking for from the start. It's more important than just having a correct translation of lengthening and widening the back. It's, wow, I can start using verbal instructions, and I can start checking whether I can translate this instruction into practice. There is the link, or if you want, the bridge between theory on one side and practice on the other. And I belabor the idea that it's practice that is videoed. It's not practice that I think I am able to perform. No, it's videoed, and I can reproduce it at any moment. If there is a camera or not, it does not matter. If I am tired or not, it doesn't matter. It's always possible to show it. So in that case, well, was Alexander exactly performing these orders that I'm giving to my pupils nowadays? I don't know. Are my people able very quickly to eradicate the wrong movements that are protruding the abdomen, unduly lifting the upper chest, and shortening the neck? Yes, they can. So it's sufficient. And yes, this is not going to satisfy people that have this idea that the straight spine is the solution, that the straight spine is taking a cardboard that is not only the lumbar curve and extending that cardboard is what they mean by lengthening the spine. Well, yes, but I always propose, well, have a lesson with me, and try it. Try controlled conditions that are filmed and see what sort of movement you're seen performing. Yeah, it's for most Alexander teachers, it's quite a surprise. They have the habit of being manipulated. They have the habit of feeling something. They have not the habit of being filmed. It's much more interesting to start playing with this technique where there are instructions. You're said to use instructions in order to improve your capacity of movement. Well, fine. You just find 2 or 3 situations where the capacity of movement is stimulating, and you see how you react on film. So that's what I would answer. Picking images. Well, when I have a film where I see a person asked to lean back with just a light support on the shoulder and going back and really lengthening, and Alexander really making certain that the upper thoracic spine is not overriding the middle thoracic spine, it's going backward, that's it. It's done. The next question is, well, performing it in front of a video. And you don't need a somatic teacher. That's what really puzzles me. Is why is it that Alexander is using his hands? Because I can explain to somebody without touching ever how exactly to reproduce what the young Irishman is seen doing on video. And I think it's much more useful in terms of learning how to use verbal instructions in order to perform adequate organization or coordinations of movements when the pupil is able to watch his own video and look at what is done on his own without the hands of something on top of you to convey the idea that you can't do it by yourself. Alexander says the pupil is guided by sensory appreciation and therefore he cannot perform the correct actions. Yes, but the sentence has there is a trick in the sentence. If I would ask if the pupil is guided by sensory appreciation, Alexander is right. What if the person starts to guide his movements with very clear, precise instructions? Is it the same? And the answer is my answer. No, it is not. You think I'm picking some images or another. When you have a lesson, the video is we are recording the full session. The 58 minutes are recorded. So it's easy when you have the film to pinpoint and say this is exactly the meaning of the orders. This is not. And the person will then have the capacity to examine and not by what is felt at the moment of the action. No. By what is seen, by the geometry, really. That would be my answer.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Jeando.
You're welcome.
For people watching, you'll get a link to Jeando's website underneath if you would like to book a lesson with him, and we will see you in the next videos. Thanks, Jeando.
Thanks.